Hey, how's it guys? Welcome back to my channel. By now, you know how my journey started. Back in June of 2018, when I got my first phone after a very long time, started watching YouTube, learned that flat earth proponents still exist, and heard a couple of debates, listened to a couple of suggestions, and decided to apply one of them to myself. And they said, choose an object and at least once a week, take a photo. So I decided that because the sun is visible to almost everyone on Earth, every day, I chose the sun. And I chose 5 p.m. because the sun is still above the horizon throughout the year. So I started taking photos. But a few weeks after I learned that flat earthers still exist, I was standing outside at around 9 o'clock in the night and saw two very bright objects in the eastern sky. I mean, at least I had a vague idea of north, south, east, and west. And at that time, I had a Hisense U series, and I just pointed my camera and took a photo. And that was on the 27th of July, 2018. Then in November of 2018, actually on the 1st of November, I took my first official 5 p.m. photo. All my logs for the sun start on the 1st of November. As the flat earth arguments kept on reaching me, I had to look for more and more evidence from the sky. And I learned early in 2019 that Venus was the morning star. So the first time I went outside so early in the morning, just before 6 a.m., was on the 29th of April 2019. And as you can see by this photo, the sky is already lighting up and Venus is barely visible. So the next morning, I went out a little bit earlier, just a few minutes. And as you can see, I was able to see Venus with the waning crescent moon. And that little bit sticking out from the bottom of the photo is the top of the tower. So I had to point my camera high into the sky to get these two objects in the same photo. And when I first pointed my camera at Venus in April 2019, I wasn't thinking about inferior conjunctions, greatest elongations, orbital resonance, right ascension, declination, or celestial coordinates. Flat earthers, did you know that that is a thing? I simply knew that there was a bright object in the sky, and that object is Venus. And my curiosity kept on growing, so I kept looking. And a few videos ago, I mentioned this video, the 11th of July, 2021. And if you can look at the data set on the screen, you can see that the moon and Venus were at exactly the same azimuth when I started recording this video that night. That was pure luck. And I am so happy because this doesn't happen often. It is a rare occurrence. And in that video, I mentioned that I didn't find it at the time of publishing, but here it is, where there was a rare alignment, exact same azimuth for Venus and the new moon. One photograph became another. One evening became another season. And now seasons have become years. And without even realizing, I was building my own observational data set. And right now, I must say it is obscene. At first, these photos were memories. Then they became comparisons. And now it is growing into a record of change. From the time I started watching, which was Venus blazing in the eastern sky before dawn, then it disappears and shows up again in the western sky as the evening star. It dims and blazes there for quite a few months before disappearing and then reappearing in the eastern sky before sunrise. Currently, it is the evening star, which it started showing around the middle of March. It will carry on being the evening star until about the middle of October, when it will disappear again for a few weeks and then reappear as the morning star, which I might be able to catch if I go outside early enough, which around the first week of November is going to be around 4:30 a.m. Venus changes brightness, altitude, and the direction I had to look, and even the time I had to wake up or stay outside late into the evening. At the time, I didn't know why, but I knew it was happening. So I kept looking. Venus has been following the same choreography for essentially, as far as we are concerned, forever. Obviously, Venus doesn't know that I, Southern Sal, am watching. What has happened is simply that Venus has become one of the threads that runs right through my observations. Every time Venus disappeared, I learned to wait. Every time it returned, I knew where to look. Slowly, almost without noticing, I began to recognize the rhythm. As my observations grew, so did my questions. Instead of asking, "Where is Venus tonight?" I found myself asking, "Why does it keep returning like this?" Only after years of observations did I begin learning the science behind what I was recording. I'm going to give you a quick run through of what's actually happening. Why doesn't Venus just keep moving further and further away from the sun in our sky? The reason is actually very simple. Venus orbits inside Earth's orbit. Because we are looking at Venus from the outside, there is a maximum angle at which we can see it from the sun. At greatest elongation, the geometry forms a right triangle between the sun, Earth, and Venus. Then, from that triangle, we can calculate the maximum angle. Earth's distance to the sun is called 1 astronomical unit. And with Venus being about 0.72 astronomical units from the sun, then the simple calculation gives us an angle of roughly 46 degrees. So Venus can move away from the sun in our sky, but it can't just keep going. It reaches its maximum elongation turns back toward the sun, and eventually disappears into its glare. And then the whole cycle begins again. Concepts like orbital mechanics, elongation, conjunction, and all the others aren't the initial starting point. The starting point is the observation. The scientific understanding comes later if you so seek. One of the most fascinating moments in this journey actually only arrived about 2 weeks ago. So I took the data set and fed it into two different AI systems. Independently, both pointed to the same explanation. There is something that happens between Earth and Venus. For every time Earth goes around the sun 8 times, Venus goes around the sun 13 times. And this is known as the 8 to 13 orbital resonance. The AI programs did not create my observations. It didn't tell me what to observe. It simply gave scientific language to something I had spent years watching unfold with my very own eyes and cameras. That for me becomes one of my unforgettable moments. Not because it changes the observations, but because it helps me understand what my observations represent. This video isn't the story of someone who set out to become an expert on Venus. It's the story of an ordinary observer who took the Flat Earthers challenge of do your own research very literally and kept on looking long enough to learn something from it. Because that's the best thing about the natural world. It doesn't perform for us. It doesn't change its behavior because we are watching. It simply does what it does. And if we are patient enough and curious enough, which we know we are, we can slowly learn its language. Venus doesn't know I'm watching. It simply continues its ancient journey around the sun, and I get to watch it from this one's ancient journey around the sun. The only thing that changed over these last 7 years is me understanding what the sky does. So, Flat Earthers, especially to you, I want to thank you truly for setting me on this journey with your screaming at us to do our own research. I want to let you know that I did, and you are wrong.